Find the answers to questions you may or may not have asked yourself here at Kaleidoscience, Conversations on Cognitive Science, hosted by Elisa Palmer and Sönke Löw. Emotions are a part of most humans' experience, and I would assume that most of our listeners are familiar with how it feels like to be angry, to have fear, or to experience joy. And in today's episode, we are going to talk with one person who has spent the last about 20 years researching or thinking about this topic. Our guest today is Professor Achim Stephan, who is a former professor of philosophy at the Institute of Cognitive Science in Osnabrück, and also was Dean of Studies at the time Sönke and I started studying here. So I'm really pleased to have you as guest today.
Thank you.
And now, as always, we want to play our little welcome game. And for that, I will start a sentence, and I want you to spontaneously continue the sentence. And the first sentence would be, as a kid, I always wanted to be.
A forester.
What was it that you liked about that?
Being in the forest, caring for animals. We walked a lot with my parents, so the first holidays were with backpacking in youth hostels together, and so that was
you're always
pretty close.
Yeah.
The second sentence is, if I was an emoji, I would be.
Oh, an emoji, a smiler.
Just a regular one with happy eyes and smile.
Well, we could also add some some fingers up, or the one with the sunglasses. That is also fine.
Okay.
The next sentence is, my favorite thing to do on a day off is.
My first intention was to review bachelor thesis, but well, there are many things I like to do. Going on a bicycle ride, being out there somewhere, that is still something I like to do.
That's nice. The next sentence is, right now I'm most fascinated by.
Yeah, I just started thinking about that, and it's not an easy answer for me, because there's not something very salient where I would say I'm mostly fascinated about that. What is more in the foreground is worries. And that is more the general development in politics. It seems that at many places people push towards radicalization, towards violence, and that is not the world I dreamt of when I was a younger person. It's definitely not the direction I wanted to see also my kids and grandchildren moving. And so it's not something that fascinates me. It's quite the opposite. But to come back to your question, it's since half a year I'm now a pensioner, and what fascinates me is how much I still have to do, and I'm happy about doing it. Yeah.
All right, the last sentence is, I know it's time to call it a day when
I'm tired.
That's a simple answer. Were you also in your teaching time always able to just call it a day at that point, or did you tend to go over that time and work more?
Well, I had more energy, of course. Yeah, that is something I realized during maybe the last 2-3 years, that I really got older.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a time when, it was before 2010, we had an institute, or the philosophy part of the Institute of Cognitive Science was at the same place as the AI in the Katharinenstraße.
Mm-hmm.
And Kai-Uwe Kühnberger and I, we both were commuting. That means there was nobody waiting for us in the evening to have dinner or bringing kids to bed or so. And it often happens that we worked until 11 or so and then went for last beer to Fricke Blöcks.
Does that even exist nowadays?
And I don't know.
Okay.
So,
because
but
I've never
is,
heard about it.
It's 500 meters from where the institute was. And I sometimes calculated, and in the 3 days being in Osnabrück, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I probably reached 38 hours of. But it was no problem. I had enough power and nobody waited. So, but that is gone. That time is definitely gone. And no, what I do now is when I notice that my energy level is not, that it would need a lot of power to continue, then I just stop.
Yeah.
And that is one of the good results you have when you are retired.
Elisa has already mentioned that you were a professor at the Institute of Cognitive Science. Could you please maybe run us through the stops of your scientific career, how you got to that point?
Well, I started in 1976 with studies of mathematics and philosophy in Mannheim. And after 2 years and the midterm exam, it was a time when you had no bachelor or master. It was for state exam for being a high school teacher. And then I moved to Göttingen and continued with these studies. And after my exam that I wrote on the concept of pleasure in Freud's psychoanalysis, my advisor asked me whether I would like to continue with the work on Freud. And I did so, and wrote then a book on meaning theoretic accesses to the, to psychoanalysis, and could develop or reconstruct the background thesis of that. And then that was finished in 1988. I got a postdoc position in the DFG Schwerpunktprogramm Cognition and Brain, and worked then together or as a postdoc with Ansgar Beckermann and Hans Flohr on emergence and the psychophysical problem. During that time I also had a wonderful visit abroad at Rutgers University. That was deeply impressive at that time. You must just think, in Germany we had more or less 3 persons who did philosophy of mind. One was Ansgar Beckermann in Göttingen, the other Peter Biri in Bielefeld, and Andreas Kämmerling in Munich. A bit was also Kühne, Wolfgang Kühne in Hamburg, but he was more interested in other things, less in philosophy of mind. And I had came in contact with Brian McLaughlin from Rutgers, and he invited me to join them as a scholar for 1 year. And in Rutgers alone, there were 8 people working on philosophy of mind. At that time, it was Fodor, Stitch, Colin McGinn, Bob Matthews, Frankie Egan, Brian McLaughlin, Barry Lower was there, Ernie Lepore, an institute of 30 people, and 28 of them worked systematically. You cannot believe what that means, yeah? And it really changed a lot for me. And then when I was back, I decided to write my habilitation on this topic, which was done in 1998. But during this time, I really was on several places. So when I came back, then my boss had moved to Mannheim, so I was again in Mannheim. Then I had a replacement position in Bielefeld. I've had a habilitation grant working more or less at home. Then again in Bielefeld. And finally I was at the Hanse Institute in Delmenhorst after my habilitation. And then also teaching in Bremen. And later then I could have a replacement at Humboldt University in Berlin. But all that time, so I never had a contract that was longer than 2 years. No single one. but nearly never jobless, only a few months. And then with this position in Berlin, I knew already that I will get a guest professorship in Ulm. And that was then the start as a professor, 2000. And from there I got Osnabrück first as a replacement professor, 2001. And then the final call as a permanent professor was in 2003. And from there on, I was here.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, if people like tell it that way and with retrospection, it always sounds like very directed
No.
way, but I guess it didn't feel that way.
Well, first it was not directed, since I never planned to have such a profession. You must know, in my family I was the first who studied. So you don't start studying thinking I will become a professor. No, my aim was a high school teacher, and I got invited by my first advisor to write a dissertation. And after the dissertation, I again thought I have to do my second state exam to become a teacher. But I got quicker an offer as a postdoc than a response from the state to become, to get the next stage for becoming a teacher. And then during this time, and definitely Rutgers had an influence, I thought, should I try it? Should I risk it? And of course, we had already 2 children at that time, and there was a time of 10 years without a permanent position. And my wife, luckily, was already on a permanent position in school. So we discussed that, and she said, go for it, risk it. If we run into problems, I will increase on a full position, and somehow we will make it. And that's how we did it. But of course, it's still, or maybe even a harder problem now, for young people, because there are less positions given how many apply for it. And there is one thing, maybe I don't know how much I recognize that during the years. Not really much. Sometimes I had little illness, so say 1 week with fever or so, and nobody knew from what. So probably there was also something bodily. But in the moment where the president of Osnabrück University gave me the document that I'm permanent professor, I had a feeling that I once had in sports at the gymnasium. We had basketball training, and we did that with a lead vest. So when you are jumping with a lead vest, you need a lot of energy to get the ball up there. And when you get off it, you feel like flying. And that was the feeling I had in that moment. So I knew then, looking backwards, what a relief that was. But not before. I did not feel this pressure so much, but I felt immediately how good it was. Yeah.
I think it's often when you are in a certain situation for quite some time that you just get used to how stressful it is, and you don't really question that anymore. Yeah,
and it develops slowly. And of course, I always had a plan B in that sense, that I would also not have treated it as a disaster. If it would not have happened, then I would have gone to school as initially planned. And I would have also have liked doing that. So, for example, during this later phase, I did philosophy for children in an elementary school, just because I loved doing it. And it was a fascinating half year. Each week, 2 hours input for the kids. They were in the 4th class. And it was wonderful. If I had to teach philosophy students who want to become teachers, I would try to do something like that with them. Go to school, experience the interesting questions of kids, and you will know how much you have to study to answer them. Because there is no book you can point to.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get all the answers out of yourself in that very moment. And they are very clever, asking good questions. So that was also nice.
So having heard about your scientific journey, you've said that you've habilitated on emergence.
Yeah, emergence, theories of emergence from unpredictability to chaos, or self-organization.
But then you somehow ended up in Osnabrück, where I got to know you mainly as professor for philosophy of emotions.
Yeah.
So how did you make that step?
Yeah, well, it started in Ulm at this university. When I got the call to be there for a year as a guest professor, I noticed that one of my old friends, Henrik Walter, was there as a doctor in the department of Manfred Spitzer in psychiatry. And so I gave Henrik a call. Well, when we are both there, we should do something together. What can we do? And he suggested, perhaps emotions is something where we can meet. And so we decided to teach a course together. And that was very successful. We invited people from all disciplines, from developmental psychology, from psychiatry, from psychotherapy, from philosophy, and so on. And in the end, made a book out of that. It's published as Natur und Theorie der Emotion. And then at that time, the VW Foundation had a first call, what became known as Schlüsselthemen der Geisteswissenschaft, so key issues in the humanities. And to apply for such a project, people from the humanities had to get in contact with someone from the natural sciences. So philosophy clearly is in the humanities, and psychiatry was treated as natural science. So we together worked on a project and got it. And so that was started, I think, in 2005. And all in all for 8 years. So we prolonged that. But before that started, there was at the ZIF in Bielefeld, so Center for Interdisciplinary Studies, a very interesting group on emotions as biocultural processes run by Birgit Röttger-Rössler, an anthropologist, and Hans Markowitsch, a neuroscientist. And I applied whether I could become a fellow there. And they allowed it. And so I had, before we started this VW project, already 1 year at the ZIF, working permanently on emotions and really learning a lot also from the anthropologists and from other areas of science. And so I moved into that deeper and deeper, while at the same time fading a bit from emergentism. So I had still at that time also one guest professorship in Amsterdam with cell biologists who worked on E. coli bacteria and were interested in emergence and reduction. So that happened, and some later papers on free will and emergence, or panpsychism and emergence. So I continued on that until maybe 2011, but less and less and less, and the emotions became the main subject area.
And just, what are emotions? Are they the same as feelings? Are they? What is an emotion? What is not an emotion?
To start with, yeah. Well, in German, for a long time, the expression Emotion und Gefühl, they were often treated as the same. But you have, of course, more feelings than what is thought of as an emotion. Hunger is not an emotion. Pain is not an emotion, but you feel it. So there is a difference. And maybe the most important difference is between emotions on the one hand and moods, or in German Stimmungen, on the other. And you might say emotions usually are event-related, situation-related. and they have intentionality. So your emotion is directed towards something that happens. And I say shortly more about that. And the way you emote presents you in the very same moment the situation as something, as dangerous, as joyful, and so on. So your emotion gives you access to the world in a certain way. Moods are not directed at some particular event. They are more what colors everything you experience. So if you say also moods have intentionality, it would be the whole world. That is maybe the main difference. Then there is debate about the length, how long, or the duration of the two. And there was a movement more from psychology that treated emotions only as emotional episodes, very short ones. Whereas we in philosophy also are interested in longer lasting emotions. Wittgenstein once asked, how long is Kummer? 2 seconds? No. That is something that goes with you for quite some time. And there might even be nice and very sad things that may go forever. If you imagine parents who lost a child, a beloved child, I'm pretty sure they will be sad even after 50 years when they think of it. Not always, but it may come again and again and again, and it's always about the child. Or someone, I once had a professor who won the gold medal in the rowing boat in 1960. And whenever he talked about, you felt that he was happy and proud. Of course. Yeah, that was a very particular event that must have been just emotionally endless in a sense. And so I always wanted to keep also these events among the emotions. And they are even longer than moods, longer lasting. Aaron Ben-Seff talks of them as enduring emotions. And he also talks of extended emotions that might happen when there is something that catches you, and until this is regulated, it might take a few days. Maybe really an offense by someone, and you might even wake up at night and think again of that. And so, but maybe after a week it's gone. But what psychologists had in mind are really short-term things. And Klaus Scherer, the founder of the Swiss Institute of Affective Science, very eminent emotion psychologist, he developed something which is known as the component process model of emotions. And he even defined emotion as an episode of, and he says, interrelated, synchronized changes in the states of all or most of the 5 organismic subsystems in response to the evaluation of an external or internal stimulus event.
Okay, can you talk us through that? Because that's been a lot of information now.
Yeah, and I wanted to explain that a bit. What are these components? And the first is what he calls the cognitive component or appraisal. And that is with what an emotion starts, the evaluation of objects, persons, events, situations. And he thinks that we always are somehow doing what he calls stimulus evaluation checks. We are always checking, is there some change that is important? There are changes that have no importance, so don't worry. But if there's a change that in any sense is relevant for me, you start a cascade of evaluations. Is it good or bad for me? If it's bad, can I cope with it? If I can cope, would I still be happy with the way I cope with it? Or would I do something that is not in concordance with the person I want to be, and so on? But never in consciousness. That happens in milliseconds. Yeah? He just developed that as a theoretical construct, saying we see how different emotions can be, and somehow these questions have to be answered in the background. Otherwise, we have no explanation why this event brings me to fear, this to anger, this to joy. Yeah, there has to be an evaluation. Now, in the moment where this starts, changes in our organism happen, and that is what he calls the neurophysiological component. Bodily symptoms. It's release of hormones. It's a change in the blood pressure, the skin conductance. So all these things that prepare the organism to cope with the situation as evaluated. And with onset of that, there is what he calls the motivational component. That means we are prepared for certain actions, or action tendencies are available. It does not mean that we act in that way, but we could. So there is the possibility to stop that, or to say, no, I notice I would like to give him my fist, but no, I don't do it. I'm not the person who does it, or so. Yeah? So you are prepared, but you know you are prepared. And then there is also a motor expression component. The voice changes, the face looks different, the whole posture of someone changes in this emotion. And these are bodily changes, yeah, these three. But, of course, there is also the experience of all that. You experience this type of emotion with regard to a situation that elicited it. And that is usually the feeling component, yeah? The subjective feeling. And maybe therefore people equated in former times feeling or Gefühl with emotion. But all these other processes are relevant. Without them, you would not feel that. And this is synchronized, as he says, very short-lived, usually a case of seconds. And you don't have this type of synchronization in these enduring or extended emotions. It would be really a problem. Yeah? If your body still fires, you would get sick. Yeah? So there is something different. There might be some sort of arousal again when you think back of something. You might feel sad again, but not in the same way as you were shocked when it happened. Or the joy also about this gold medal changes over the years. But I would still call it an emotion, because there is the experiential component and there is the connection to the event that triggered it, but not in this strong synchronized sense as this emotional episode. And that is, of course, I mean, for psychologists, there might be also a different reason why they are so much interested in that. This is what you can study in the lab. How should you study enduring emotions as a psychologist? As philosophers, we can think about that. But there is really a difference. And so that would be the emotion part. And if you connect that now to moods, you might think of what are the modifiers of moods? How do they come about? And that is something I myself wrote about, a paper, Moods in Layers, where I was thinking about, and I thought there are at least 5 components that are important. One is environmental conditions. If you go out, sun is shining, the beer garden has opened, and so and it might just be pleasant. You might feel nice and good. And the other day you have worked the whole day and want to relax a bit, and cold, rainy, no step in front of the house. Yeah, that is one thing. Or you go to interesting places where you enjoy a landscape or an old mosque or an old church and chapel. So where you get a feeling of this atmosphere and enjoy it. Then there are organismic changes. You might feel extremely hungry, and that is not good for your mood. Or maybe you overdid in gym and the body aches and so. Or on the other hand, you could do your exercises and feel relaxed and powerful afterwards. Or you had no sleep. So these are bodily things, that organismic things that also do something with our emotions. But both are more or less short-lived. They can easily overcome by other influences. It's different if you have a chronic illness. That is something that is lasting, very permanent. And then there is a connection to emotions. If emotions were very strong, they might fade into moods. So think of, there's a standard example. One of the parents had an extreme stressful day. Anger with the boss maybe in the job. Comes home. The children do not do something very special, but they are angry. Why? They have not done something that deserves anger, but they are in an angry mood coming home from the stress they had at their working place. So in that case, the strong emotions did something with you and moved you into an angry state. And that means you respond quicker in an angry way than if you are not in an angry mood. You are more or less looking for situations where you can show your anger. That would be one example, but I also draw connection to political things. When you get the same emotion again and again and again, it might also move you into a certain mood. Think of someone who is definitely not happy with what current politics is doing. Now you have time for 4 years to vote again. In between, you either are happy or angry with what is done. Again and again and again. And that easily gets you into a certain mood concerning politics. How can you regulate that? If, for example, concerning the climate crisis, you really think, why doesn't change anything really? So there are steps, but not enough, you might think. And then you have this frustration each day. Or if you are extremely worrisome concerning the war in Ukraine and Russia, but it doesn't change. Whereas these normal things for emotions, when someone on the street makes an offensive remark, that is gone. You somehow have an exchange and you are gone, and it's at least after one day you forget it. And that cannot happen in these longer lasting occasions where you get that again and again. That is also something that changes the mood or can change it. And of course also a general political atmosphere. I sometimes thought, well, if I had to grow up in Germany during the 30s, what would that have meant? Feeling such a pressure that if you say the wrong words, you might end in prison. Or for people now being in Russia. What does that mean? If you say this is a war, stop it, and you are brought to prison for that. So what is that doing with you as a mood, in terms of moods. And finally, there is, or what I might also add, there might also be peer groups that are in a certain mood that, somehow you share with them, or being in such a peer group. Just to have 3 different types where you immediately notice how different they are mood-like. One are, say, the angry citizens, Wutbürger. No? Other might be people who share the Gothic movement. And third might be the flower power people from the 60s, 80s. Always having a joint available, good music and so on. Yeah. Completely different atmospheres and moods that are probably lived through. And finally, there is something where people talked about as existential moods, or something where that captures how life is going in general, whether it was more or less successful, whether you reached the goals you aimed at, whether the relationships to people that are important for you are well developing, or whether all that is in chaos and not developing well. That is, of course, the most elementary thing. And I think it was Bollno once called it beständige Lebensstimmungen, this, which is, so to say, the sediment of things that happen. And of course, nice weather can modify that a bit. But if someone is deeply in worry with his life, that is only a very small change. It cannot really get someone out of it. No? And so that is maybe the general picture I have of moods. And being in certain moods, as I already said, so when you say of emotions that have action tendencies, moods have, so to say, emotion tendencies. Yeah? When you are in a particular mood strongly, it's easier to experience particular emotions than others.
Yeah.
So that might be the whole picture.
While you were talking, I've also been constantly thinking about how I react when I'm in a certain mood to certain situations. For example, of course, when I'm in a good mood, people smiling at me make me much easier happy than when I'm really annoyed and just really angry at whoever I'm facing.
That is what I meant. And it's difficult then to accept that the other really is nice to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also sometimes when I also know the other way, actually, that when I'm in a bad mood and a person is openly smiling at me, that also changes my mood.
Yes.
Not my emotion, but my mood is changed. Or at least how I feel. That's how I feel.
It is, of course, an invitation to come back into a good mood.
Yeah.
And it also does something with you emotionally. Yeah? You experience. So you would evaluate that moment as, here's someone friendly with me. Give her a chance, or him. Yeah, and respond also friendly, and that does something. Yeah.
Especially with the last point of moods you were talking about, I forgot the name. Could you repeat the name of the last?
You mean these deep existential?
Yeah. So while you were talking, I was mainly thinking about people who are suffering chronically from mental health disorders. So like, for example, when they have had depression for 10, 20 years, everything is always inked in that way of seeing and perceiving the world. And I was just now also thinking about if from that model, when it's this existential mood, what's a way of changing or adapting to that?
Yeah, perhaps I should even add something beyond moods. A colleague of mine who was at that time in Durham and later then in Vienna and now in York is Matthew Ratcliffe. And he wrote a book on feelings of being, and he spoke of existential feelings and even distinguished them from moods. And the feelings that are dominant in depression would be existential feelings, according to him, less a mood. So you might be in a depressive mood, but if someone really goes through a major depression, there is something changing. And he says as moods, existential feelings are not directed towards anything in specific in the world. Rather, they are something like a background orientation through which everything we perceive, and that is exactly what you meant, feel, think, and act upon, is structured. And they constitute, as he says, how we find ourselves in the world. And in general, he says then the following: the world as a whole can sometimes appear unfamiliar, unreal, distant, or close. And it can be something that one feels apart from or at one with. One can feel in control of one's overall situation or be overwhelmed by it. One can feel like a participant in the world or like a detached, estranged observer, staring at objects that do not feel quite there. And he says such relationships structure all our experience. And that is something still different from moods. Yeah, in being in such relationships to the world. And we had together a research project on emotional experience in depression, and that was more studied under the terms of these existential feelings.
The way you just described like the interaction with the world, and it sounded like, I mean, of course, that's an influence, like the emotion or the mood or the state you're in has really an influence on how you interact with the world. But is the same thing true in reverse? So does like the world have an influence on how I feel or what my mood is, and can I like manipulate the world in a way that it helps me maybe get in a good mood or something?
Yeah, that of course you can or you have at least some influence on how events are going. For example, if you notice that you are somewhat more grumpy than you would like to be, so you might think of what would be something I would enjoy. And if you notice, if I do a bicycle ride along the Hase, that would be something great. Or maybe doing the wooden path over the trees there somewhere close to Osnabrück. That would be something that, where my thoughts are completely gone, what I'm ruminating about or so. Then I feel myself as an actor and doing something. Then you can start doing that, and it might help. And you can, of course, we are doing that continuously, that we set up the world in a certain way that also can help to change our moods. So if you have a date with a person you are deeply interested in, you might arrange that in a certain way. You have perhaps some flowers, you might have nice music, you might have candlelight, you might have prepared some interesting stuff to eat, and so on. And that gives an atmosphere where the other person notices that you are doing something for her or for him, and that might get the right response. Yeah? And that is definitely true, but there are things, that's why I said that, where it's very hard to change something. Yeah, think again of how to do something that the climate crisis reduces. That is not something you can do by putting flowers on your table. Yeah, that is far beyond. There you need thousands of people. You need hundreds of governments. It's not sufficient that one state does something. You would need cooperation among too many, and that is where you initially asked me what fascinates me. That is something where my worries come from.
I also thought, while you were talking about those low-level and really close to own life situations, I was also thinking about, well, but if I see something in the world in general that I would really like to be different in order also to positively impact my mood, other people's moods, I would personally not feel able to make a big enough change. So I would feel, well, not really lost of hope, but just too small to make such a big impact that I wouldn't know how to start. And then I might start feeling like starting to get a bit hopeless about that specific thing.
I understand.
So kind of this going to a larger scale, how can a single person who wants the world to be a better place to positively impact other people's moods, is that even possible, or is it just always small?
It's I just thought of a song by Udo Lindenberg where he somewhere says, and didn't we want to change the world when we were young? Yeah. And I don't have it in mind completely, but it just came to me so where he was reminded, now being more than 70, what aims he had. Yeah. And that might be one of the really big challenges for us. I guess our emotional system comes from living in small communities. It did not change over the last 1,000 years. But now we get information from the most far area of the world. If anything happens there, and you have it immediate on your laptop or on the TV set. And there happen far more things than you can control, where you have an influence or nearly no influence, or even if you have an influence, a lot of costs and consequences. Think of, say, Germany avoids to pollute the air, pollute rivers, and so on. What would that mean? It would mean that our companies in the industry have restrictions that nearly no other company in the world has. That might lead to a disaster of being still someone on the world market who can deliver for prices others deliver. If that leads to unemployment in, say, 10 million or 20 million, we have a disaster in society. And so all these are consequences or possible consequences, and that would not be there if everyone would move into this direction. But you can't do it alone. So you need cooperation partners, you need decisions on a larger scale, an insight that we need it. Yeah? But that definitely extends what one person can do, even what a movement can do. And how to live with that? It's difficult. I mean, my colleague in Berlin, Jan Slaby, and also Imke von Mauer, they think about non-feeling, and they are wondering that people sometimes don't feel where they should. Well, what did Thunberg say? I want you to panic, but there is no panic. Yeah, why not? It's maybe the way to live with it. Yeah, to knowing that it's not right and still not have your life completely damaged. Yeah, still enjoying joy when seeing your kids or your friends and doing something that is nice for being here on world. Yeah, and I mean, when I was in the age of possibly becoming parent, there were also in the late 80s many people saying, how can you put children into this world? And I said, yeah, fair question. But people also had kids during the 30-year war in 1620, 1630. And time was probably worse than now. No security at all. And we have at least a lot of social systems that somehow work and where you... And it's also no solution just to decide, no, not with me, I stop becoming father or mother.
You've just mentioned that when you plan to get children or have children, that you were also asked how you can put children into a world that's not secure. So how does the world actually impact how we feel, experience the world, have emotions, etc.?
Yeah, in general, perhaps I have to say a few words more. There was a paradigm shift in cognitive science and affective science during the last 30 years. For a really long period, we thought everything is important is going on in the brain or in the central processing unit of the computer. Whatever happens out there is a stimulus, comes in, is processed, and gets an output response from our side. And what changed was that first for cognition or cognitive processes, that we somehow offload things to the world, what we are doing. There is a famous example of a barkeeper gets thousands of orders in, and it would be one thing to memorize them and to fill the glasses. Another thing is immediately when he hears white beer or red wine, schnapps, and so on, he just puts the cocktail, he just puts the glasses on the table, and then the glasses do the memory for him. He only needs to know that is the glass for red wine, that is the glass for white wine, and then it's much more easy to do that. This also was used, and I think I mentioned that already a bit, that we use tools, or sometimes it's also that we talk about scaffolds. We use scaffolds or scaffoldings to either support or to make possible at all certain moods, or so, with visiting nice landscapes and so on. This was what Jan Slaby once called the user-resource interaction model, where there is a person who wants to do something or wants to have something and structures the world in a way that the world supports what she aims at. And then he contrasted that with influence from out there, what he called for particular cases, mind invasion. And what he thought of is, he had as an example a novice in a company. You could also think of being a first semester student coming to university after school. And then what you notice is there's a certain atmosphere. How people communicate with each other, what jokes they laugh about, what jokes they don't laugh about. And in the company there might also be, how long do you answer emails in the evening? Would you also answer at 10 at night? Would you answer an email from the boss on Saturday or not? And given that this moves into your behavior more and more, and in the end turns out to be detrimental for your initial idea about how to live your life, he would call it mind invasion. And we used this term for a while and then noticed, there are a lot of influences from out there that shape us, but not all are detrimental. We participate in culture, in the values of a culture. We are in childcare, in families at home, and usually they want to benefit us. It's not the aim of parents to be detrimental with what they do, and not in school. Although there might be occasions where things go wrong, but it's not the usual intention. So we started calling that mind shaping, when it's just open, whether it's good or bad. And only as Jan Slaby initially had thought of, detrimental in the case where it's against your own ideas about what a good life is. And then we noticed that you can find that in many, many occasions. So we did some research with doctorate students on radicalization, where structures are built that try to recruit new members for radical organizations. We also found it in what is called colorism in South Asia, where we had a student from Pakistan who looked at how colored people are treated, even within the same family. Those with darker color had more problems in school and so on, in advertisements, in job facilities, marriage market, wedding market. So everywhere. And that is over generations developed, and the influence from out there with these values on the individuals, that they are ready to take bleaching creams, although they contain mercury, which is dangerous, and so on. So here that is clearly a case of mind invasion in some sense. And there is one that really very recent in the way it is developing, use of synthetic media, where small groups can really have an important influence on our life in general. If you have fake news where you listen to an interview of, say, a politician or another important person that they never gave, where they utter sentences they never have uttered, and you no longer are able to trust what is a good information, what is a wrong, a misleading information. And in the same moment happens what Chesney and Citron called the liar's dividend. What they mean is that those who really have done something wrong, if they say, no, this is not reporting what I have done, this is a fake video, then you also question correctly investigated work by journalists. So if they are called fake news, although they are right, and on the other hand you get fake news where you don't know that they are, that is really a situation that can destabilize our trust in good information and our trust in the basics of democracies. Because we need a common basis where we can say, well, these are the facts, and we want a change of the world in that or that or that direction. And if we no longer know what the facts are, we really run into problems. So maybe that is what worries me most currently.
It is very fascinating, like at the end, you talked about fake videos, and there's also like a connection to the very terrible use of artificial intelligence. And
Yes.
I think it's like also a very important topic right now. So it's very interesting how like two topics of cognitive science meet at a point that is somewhat unexpected. Do you think that the philosophy of emotion benefits a lot from, like, I don't want to call it a scaffold now, but like the context of being embedded in cognitive science?
Well, for me, it made it was a really important place. And I also noticed how it changed myself a bit. I started more clearly from analytic philosophy and well, if you compare that with mathematics, you have pure mathematics and you have applied mathematics. And so what I did at the beginning, and particularly the emergent stuff, that was more pure philosophy. And the more I moved into cognitive science, working with students who work on so many applications. And they are not just philosophers. There are many who are deeply interested in philosophy, but many are also maybe more interested in neuroscience or in psychology or in linguistics, computer linguistics, or in AI and neuroinformatics. So they have a whole bunch of interests that cry for application. So it was then also clear for me what I have to offer these students must also be more type of application and less just metaphysical ideas. And that is what happened during my research over the last 20 years. Our initial questions when I started with Henrik Walter was, how do emotions relate to the world? Yeah, it was about intentionality. We wrote a book or edited a book on affective Intentionalität. So it was about these topics. But we then started already with Matthew Ratcliffe on emotions in depressive or emotional experience in depression. So where you had already a first application. And then later students came who had a background from own experiences, what it means to bring people back from, say, radical organizations where kids were educated as suicide bombers. And what can you do to get them back into society? And when you notice that your research that was initially a very theoretical process, that this can somehow contribute to that, which is really relevant for societies, for people, I felt we are on the right way. And then we could see that it has also to do with, say, these discrimination fields of colorism. Another work that appeared was on nostalgia and how, for example, museums in Russia are supporting nostalgic feelings back to the Soviet era, while at the same time memorial is closed. Yeah, so all these things then spread into issues that are relevant for society. And I thought it was worth it. Yeah, and I think the Institute of Cognitive Science was a special place for doing that. You can, of course, also do it somewhere else. I mean, Jan Slaby is a member of this research group working on affective societies. Yeah, they have that as a main focus. But we could also establish something here.
I think that brings our episode slowly to an ending. Is there any last sentence you would like to add, or?
No, I'm quite happy with what we talked about, and there's no final message. Maybe the one that we should take emotions serious. That might indeed be last thing. In political discourse, emotions are often put to the side as don't be emotional, be rational. And I would, well, of course, there are utterances that are just emotional without any thought. But mostly the emotions present how people experience what's going on. And that is important to know. You have to know how people feel about what's going on. And also for oneself, emotions are a very good indicator of whether we are on the right track in our decisions. If we just purely rationally run through options and think option A is the right one, but if there is a feeling that interacts and says, doesn't feel right, then I would propose think again. Where is this feeling coming from? What is it that disturbs your good mood about that? And I'm pretty sure you will find something. And then revise your decision, and if it feels good, you have made the right decision. Mm-hmm. And other way around too. Yeah, but that might suffice.
Okay, thank you so much for coming here today and talking to us. It was a pleasure having you here, and I think I've learned a lot again. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
When you enjoy listening to us, the best way to support us is by following us on your chosen podcast app. This could either be Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or the website of the Cognitive Science Student Journal. Another good way to support us is by following our Instagram account, which is called kaleidoscience_pod. On our Instagram account, you will also get regular information on the next episode. Thanks a lot for supporting us. This was Kaleidoscience, hosted by Elisa Palmer and Sönke Löw. Produced by Alina Ohnesorge, Elisa Palmer, Sönke Löw and Sophie Kühne. Produced in collaboration with the Cognitive Science Student Journal. The music was produced by Jan-Luca Schröder. The logo was designed by Annika Richter. Thank you for listening and joining us on our journey through conversations on cognitive science.